welcome to today's talk with Anne Maree Barry, part of our ongoing series of online artist talks and curatorial conversations. Anne Maree Barry is an artist based in Clare, I believe.
Yeah, like in Ennistimon right now, yeah.
From a very nice setup I can see in the background there. And her research-led practice addresses connections within contemporary space, which unites memory, narrative, geography, sociology, and architecture. And the result being creative non-fiction films that explore her own sense of self and space within a community. Anne Maree Barry's work has been selected and screened at numerous international film festivals, museums, and public institutions, such as the Irish Film Institute, the Dublin International Film Festival, Curtas Vila de Conde Film Festival, Les Rencontres Internationales, the Dark Lake Film Festival, Tampere Art Museum, Dublin City Gallery, the U-Lane, and the Lab. Her work, Missing Green from 2013, a research-led documentary short film, was screened as part of the Irish Architecture Foundation's Open House program, and was also shortlisted and nominated for a Radhark Award. And 2015 film No Mean City, produced with assistance from the Liaison of Independent Filmmakers of Toronto and Screen Training Ireland Bursary Award. And today we're going to talk a little bit about, I guess, your overall practice, but primarily the film Rialto Twirlers, currently screening as part of the Glucksman's exhibition 1234, Dancing Contemporary Artist Films. As of this current moment, now switch online to www.glucksman.org. And maybe we can start with you telling us a little bit about that particular film. For those who haven't seen it, maybe you can tell us a bit about what it is, what it entails, and how it came about.
It's quite that film is quite simple. It like captures like a single moment of these dancers from a nondescript area, and it has like its roots in, personally for me, watching musicals when I was small, like Singing in the Rain. When I was younger, not small, a child, Singing in the Rain. I really liked one-take films at the time, like Russian Ark. I've always been obsessed with like synchronized swimming films. I think the kind of like there's these aqua musicals and that kind of glamorous kind of style. And then at the time my interest in kind of clubbing as well, and DJing with an ex-partner of mine. So it was all these kinds of things that like amalgamated together to create this like one film. But like my research and development of this work, I think it happened around like, that film's 2010. So the research and development happened around 2008, where I did a residency with Common Ground in Rialto. It's called Studio 468. And I actually lived in the area in Rialto since 2003, and I saw actually these groups going around twirling batons, I never actually saw the pom-poms, but I saw like these young people with the batons, and I actually wondered what they would do, like what they do. And I had made like a film called Covered Road that I made with my dad, and that at that time it had won I think the Dark Light Film Festival, the Best Irish Short, which at that time was quite a big feat for me, because that piece of work was like, again, like pitted against like, filmmakers who had budgets, who were funded by the film board and so forth. So me, for an experimental film that I made with my dad, to win that was like a really good accolade. So then I applied for Studio 468, and Siobhan Gagan, the director of that, and actually Sheena Barrett was from the curator of the lab in Dublin. She was on the panel, and then they were like, what is this like artist going to make? Like, she makes like experimental films, she hasn't worked with people before, what is she actually going to do? And I think they were a little bit worried, but they selected me, and off I went with it. And that was kind of my into it. And then all the groups knew I lived in the area as well. So I might, you know, later on I bumped into them on the street and we'd have a chat or whatever. And it was kind of getting to know, I think, Denise Lucas, who was like one of the facilitators of the majorettes as well. And it was quite a long process because, like, say, you know, I wouldn't be like, say at that time, because I was quite young, if like a film director going, I'm going to make this and this is how it's going to work. Because I was with an artist in the community program, it was like, what do I want to do within this community? How can I give back to them, and so forth. So it was quite an incredible process. I didn't think it would go on for so long. They didn't either, if you saw some of the interviews. But it really was a whole learning process as a filmmaker and how I wanted at that time to make work. Yeah.
So I mean, you're very much embedded in the community then.
Yeah, like
as a neighbor, but as somebody who gets to know these kids. And I wonder, like, you know, how did they take to that? How was that? I mean, I don't suppose it's often that they have a experimental filmmaker or contemporary artist kind of come to them and say, we want to document your rehearsals and kind of get to know you and make this film. What was that response like from the young people who were involved in the majorettes?
Like at the time, like I think they were kind of intrigued, and then I'm softly spoken as well. And then for a lot of until that shoot for Rialto Twirlers, like the film, it was just me and a camera and me interviewing them and me going to competitions and going on the bus with them. And pretty much I could pretty much make myself invisible. But as a documentary filmmaker, that's quite good as well, like a good kind of thing to be able to do, because no one was looking at the camera, no one really was bothered that I was there, or like they were kind of a bit shy when I used to ask them questions, but mainly like, no, you know, it was for that time as well, they still all had phones and technology was getting big, but like now it might be a bit different. I don't know, did I answer your question?
You did, yeah, you did. I mean, yeah, I also wonder, I guess, you know, I mean, obviously I was looking at some of the kind of production documentation that you did around the project. And I guess the thing I'm kind of curious about is, you know, what is it you think it is about kind of cheerleading or majorettes, which I guess are these kind of quintessentially kind of, you know, American style kind
of. Like I actually was thinking about this as well, because no one could tell me why they brought in pom-poms, you know, and it was just, I think, this adaptation of that kind of culture, which fascinated me as well. And then there was like this cheerleading film at the time. I know there's a big Netflix cheerleading show on Netflix at the moment that people sent me links to, but it was there's a cheerleading show I was obsessed with at the time was Bring It On with Kirsten Dunst, and it's quite a funny film. And then what happened, my partner at the time, he told me about this the guy Mark Bryan, who was on these forums, music forums, about that he remixed the music to Bring It On, and that kind of fascinated me. And then eventually I got funding from the Arts Council and I was able to bring him over and like do a really good interview with him, and he did a workshop with the Rialto Twirlers as well, some of them. And like looking back, it's actually quite phenomenal that we did all that, you know. I pretty much organized all of that, and like Common Ground did help me, but I think I'd finished the residency at that point. But yeah, so that it was just like from Mark, like from hearing about cheerleading back then, it was all like competitive and sport wise. I think with the majorettes in Dublin as well, that was more about community, having an activity for girls as well that kept them out of trouble. The John Gallagher, who was the councillor at the time, he actually died recently, but he told me like the girls did majorettes and then the boys did boxing. So that would keep them all kind of like, you know, they had an activity to go to. It was like performative. It like just kept them out of trouble, you know. And I think for the film as well, what I wanted to capture in the end was like this kind of unity of like, you know, when it's shown at film festivals, no one really knew where they were from, you know, what their socio-economic background was. Like it was pretty much like what they, as non-professional dancers, how they performed within a space. And that's how I kind of narrowed it all down within the process, instead of making like a standard documentary, or else kind of like what I didn't want to do either was kind of like be a voyeur into a life that I wasn't part of.
Yeah, there seems to be a kind of I mean, it comes across as kind of this, certainly this point of access. You know, that I think one thing that you become very aware of when you're watching is that it's not that one take kind of film, that has this kind of sense of that there are multiple takes and multiple kind of cuts kind of brought together. And I wonder if maybe you can talk a little bit about that alignment, I guess, between kind of dance choreography and cinematography. Is there kind of a relationship between the two that that maybe appeals to you when you're making a film like this, that you can see yourself kind of working through sequences or working through maybe cuts that feels like it has certain affinity to what the kids are actually doing?
Yeah, like it kind of has to do with my, like I love editing, and like I would be a fast editor. Like I cut into things, like, you know, we shot all day and it was 6 minutes, you know. So I kind of, even back then, I love fast things, you know. I love GIFs, I love all that kind of stuff. I love watching just clips on YouTube. It's just the way my mind works. So even back then, I kind of was embracing that rather than making a very like quite a longer film. It's just not in my nature to do that. I think the most I could push it was to For Leisure with Dignity is 25 minutes, and that's the most I've been able to push it to. I forgot your question again, Chris.
Oh, it was about the relationship between, or if there is a relationship, I guess, between kind of cinematography and choreography.
Oh yeah, like because
I guess there seems to be some kind of relationship there happening between kind of the camera and their movements. So
yeah, like that was totally I can't pronounce the word, but like I was just like, I documented the routine with my iPhone. I then looked at everything that they were doing, and then I knew that I wanted a jib like for it, and a big space to capture what they could do and to get all the palms in, because they're aesthetically more pleasing than batons. But there is a baton at the start. But and then that space as well, that took me quite a while to find. It's in Dublin 8 as well, so it wasn't that far from the bus to bring the majorettes from Dolphin House to that building. And it was, I think it was used for some RT TV show, and I got in touch with the location manager, and then he told me about it. But it's like it was an old Eason's building where they stored books and stuff like that. But it was just this vast open space that was like absolutely perfect for what I wanted to do and what I wanted to achieve. So I was able to get the height. You could get that now with a drone and it'd be far cheaper. But with the jib, I think there's you know, a nice quality to that as well, you know. So it was carefully orchestrated by me. I'm not a professional dancer either, but in all my films there is a sense of movement in them, even if it's camera movement, or even in Missing Green, where Nia Valger is walking down these streets, she's moving and then the camera's moving with her. But you know, even in No Mean City, there's like snow is the movement in that. And it's just something that always kind of like fascinated me, really, you know. And then there's kind of like my clubbing background as well and stuff, and how people interact in spaces.
Well, I guess yeah, it does have that kind of strong kind of visual sensibility. Even when you talk about this kind of, you know, the cavernous kind of warehouse that they're in, and of course the kind of contrast between that kind of, you know, gloomy, dingy space and these, like, you know, sparkly, glittery costumes and the pom poms and that. So there's kind of a kind of incongruity there, almost, of like, you know, is this where they really rehearse?
Yeah, no. There was, I was actually going to shoot the in the community centre in Rialto as well, but and that was actually a lovely old hall, but it wasn't high enough for the jib. Yeah, so there was those like little details and complications as well that I had to resolve whilst making it.
Well, I'm not going to push you too far on your clubbing background, but I did want to ask you a little bit about the way you use music. And so
Yeah.
it's a collaboration between yourself and the artist-musician Sunken Foal, and not your first collaboration with them.
Yeah.
I wonder, could you tell us a little bit about, the importance of music to your film, and also how that collaboration tends to work? Is it a case of that the film comes first and then the soundtrack is kind of built around that, or is it something that kind of has a more kind of organic kind of back and forth to it as the film progresses?
Yeah, like with that film, it was so the Rialto Twirlers, they're dancing to like 90s rave, which wasn't actually that like popular at the time. It is now. And I think that might have been an influence from their facilitators as well, and an older group of women, but they still loved it, you know. Rihanna was quite big at the time, and I always kind of thought if you were like a trend forecast, if you went to any of these majorette competitions, they were held in Tala, that in the basketball arena, that if you went to any of these competitions, that as a trend forecaster, you could predict what music would be, you know, next, or what was coming or whatever, but no one did. But like music for me, like I think like I spent like a decade going out with DJs, so then I learned to mix myself. And then I used to, like, you know, I think I had a misogynist, or what was it, misogynist mega mix done once, and it was all like rap songs with misogynistic material, until like this sounds terrible, but it's actually quite good, but it was still like, it took me a while to even like, like even realize, like, say, you know, listening to dance hall, how homophobic that is. And kind of like, it was kind of a journey through all that music by listening to it, and then being able to like beat match as well. And I think I probably surprised a lot of like my male peers and partners that I could actually do it and make people dance as well. And then it's from that kind of community, then I kind of knew who to work with on my films, basically. And with Dunk is very like, he composes music for documentaries as well. He didn't like the process that we did, because I was at the time a total control freak. I put that down to my anxiety, that I didn't really know that was really like, you know, I was high functioning with anxiety. And they're dancing to 90s rave music, and then we recorded them dancing to no music, so you can hear the palms. So I had all that recorded, and then Dunk recorded some other, like, you know, background tracks as well and stuff. And then I edited it from all the shots, so the routine would be in sync, and it would be the length of the routine. It's kind of stretched out a bit actually, but so that it would kind of look like pretty seamless. And then I would edit that and then send it to Dunk, and then Dunk would send it back to me, and then we'd keep going back and forth. And he hated me for a very long time. And I was very much like, I was very much like, it's very hard in a collaboration when there's two very creative people. So Dunk is really quite creative and very good at what he does, but their egos actually clashed like completely. And I think now he really likes the work, but it's an example of how it was an example of how like collaboration can work, where it can be seamless. It looks like there's been no heartache gone into it, like nothing, but there actually was a lot of, and a lot of it was down to me as well, being really like trying to be a total perfectionist. When, you know, in my later film works, that's kind of gone out the window.
But I mean, it's kind of like a metaphor for the film itself, isn't it? This idea of, you know, there are kind of clashing egos, or kind of missteps, or kind of things that maybe kind of come in conflict or something like that, and yet you end up with this kind of routine which feels seamless. It kind of feels so natural, as if it kind of comes with ease. And I think that's probably where I'm kind of going with this idea of kind of, you know, that process of kind of filming and then shaping it and putting things together and getting the music kind of built into it, that there's some sort of parallel process there to the work that your subjects are actually putting in. I guess, you know, thinking about the Rialto Twirlers, this kind of dance film, it was also interesting for me to come across this fact that you were recently commissioned to make another film over the summer, working with a group of Muslim women and girls, another dance film. And I was wondering if maybe you could tell us a little bit about that project. Is it currently in motion, or is it on hiatus because of the various lockdown things? And what can we expect from that project?
It's on hiatus. It actually needs to be like re-edited, but it was accepted into the Catalyst in International Film Festival that's in Limerick, in the Bell Table in March, but then COVID happened, and so, you know, that would have been interesting to see what people thought of it, and to network, and because the festival didn't go online actually, so that was kind of a missed opportunity there. But it started in around June of 2019, and it's a very different process from Rialto Twirlers, because it's mainly me, and me as well, a kind of a learning process of trying to use technology that I can manage myself, like not a Steadicam operator or having a jib or even a drone. So I had this little rig that I could like attach to my phone, so then that I could navigate in and around the dancers. And sometimes that didn't work at all, and then sometimes it did. But like what worked the best was when I asked these like Muslim girls and young women about how did dance make them feel. And that was more as actually not an artist, but as a documentary filmmaker, what I was more interested in, because they would like arrive like to Visual in Carlo with their like really beautiful dresses, like, you know, lovely like embroidery detail on them, and then they would do the dance like class with Kathy Coughlin, and sometimes I would do the dance class as well with them. But like it wasn't like they were in like gym gear or anything like that, they were like ready to perform. And for these Muslim girls as well in that summer, they were really appreciative of being, you know, essentially allowed out during their summer holidays. So it was a really big deal for them, and for them to like share their, you know, their experiences of coming to Ireland from Myanmar. So there were Rohingya women and girls. So it was like learning about a whole new culture as well for me. It was learning how to learning how to use equipment that that was kind of unfamiliar for me as well, and for me not to have a team around me as well, which is really odd as well. But it was, I think the most rewarding thing I got out of that was like talking to these women and girls as well. And then in International Rohingya Day, there was a screening of the film in Visual. I think that was in the August of 2019, and the kind of male leader of the Rohingya group, he came over to me afterwards and congratulated me, which was a big deal for, you know, a male leader of, you know, to congratulate a woman. That sounds really archaic, but it's true. But it was, he didn't realize what the women were doing. He didn't know they could even dance. You know, they are at a time, but like, you know, there was such a big group of them, we didn't really know what to do. So it was quite, not as like, it was maybe a period of 6 weeks, so it wasn't as structured as Rialto Twirlers, wasn't as long a project. It's something I'd like to go back to, and something I'd like to, you know, for audience to see as well, and what they kind of think of it. You know, it like is a non-perfect film perfect.
I mean, in terms of the way you work, and I guess you outlined it a little bit in this recent project as well, where you're embedding yourself with communities that for lack of a better word, might be on kind of the fringe of mainstream culture. I wonder if do you see your work as having a particularly strong or more, maybe more subtle social or political dimension to it? I mean, is there a message that you're trying to kind of get out there through your work, through these nonfiction films?
Yeah, because like even the research that I did in Missing Green, like that, like about, you know, with social housing, where do people go when that community is dismantled for new buildings? So say even now, I saw someone say on Twitter that, you know, they can't, like their granny grew up in Sheriff Street, but they'll never be able to afford to live there. So there's those kind of questions posed in Missing Green. That was in 2013 as well. You know, I spoke to Frank MacDonald back then about the Wiener concept. Yes, I think that's it. But that was to ease traffic going down streets, so that, you know, it would be like, so that children could play, or, you know, they're like pretty much what's happening now with like restrictions nowadays with, like, you know, say in Ennis, my nearest town, that they have like there's no cars going down the main street or whatever. So that film is 2013, so things I was looking at back then weren't current, but they are now. That kind of seems to happen within my work a lot. Say I think No Mean City, that was more looking at like like forgotten land monuments. That's kind of relevant now. And then Leisure with Dignity as well. The ending of that, like, it's not a spoiler, so it's fine, is a Molly Malone statue, which I was fascinated by back in 2016, 2017, because people used to like climb on top of her and like rub her bosom and stuff like that. And it was this kind of like manhandling of this like Irish kind of monument and sculpture, and what does that mean as, like, you know, for women. So they're not like, you know, the films are quite aesthetic, but there is like a message behind them.
And I guess one thing that that kind of interests me is how your work is adapting to the current situation. And I think you maybe touched on it a little bit where you're talking about, and maybe this is for very different reasons, but in your current project, or your most recent project, where you talked about kind of doing things yourself, not having the big film crew there. And it kind of makes me think a little bit about the fact that you have a bit of a background in experimental video, and you've done work with analog photography. And there's a concern, I guess, for you around the kind of proliferation and this kind of the prominence now of kind of, you know, digital media, of everything being online, of the screen as this kind of constant interface that people are dealing with. And is there kind of a loss of kind of that human connection or that materiality that might come through this kind of this increasing trend?
Yeah, like I made Rialto Twirlers for cinema, and it was shown in all these film festivals. So that would be lost in translation for sure, because you don't see the detail as well online, or you're not fully like immersed in it. And then Missing Green as well, that was made for cinema, but as my budgets and funding got less, the more I had to adapt. So I even think the film with the Rohingya women, that was actually a process of me, the beginning of me trying to readapt my skills, and you know, like how things can visually work online or hourly as well, and how you can be immersed in them. I think the way I edit as well will contribute to that. I also think like that I've taken a little bit of a break in making as well. But I think right now that I actually am quite excited to make something new, but actually it would be for an online format. But it would probably, I hoped it would be working with actors as well. So you would have, like, say we're chatting now, we can see each other, but you'd have that kind of engagement as well. In theatre practices like Live Collision and new productions, they're like, last week I watched the Party to End All Parties online, and it was great. You know, it was, I did feel like I was immersed in it, and then I could kind of check something over there and I didn't feel like I was gone, which is actually what happens within theatre anyway. No one's watching all the time, you know, or even with a film, like, you're going to drift off somewhere. So unless you have like really amazing concentration skills, like, you know, I don't know, but I think, like, any, as an artist, like, I'm excited to adapt, you know, and as a filmmaker as well. I think, like, some really interesting things could happen. But my previous works, no, like, they do need to be shown in a large space. Like, I love seeing it when it was installed in the CIS gallery. It was great, you know. It was like, my own personal retrospective.
But it has a certain impact, of course, and you're right about that. I think kind of the detail and the kind of aesthetic of it as well, that it feels very like cinematic, very filmic, I think.
Yeah. And it would go into like those like musicals, and those aqua musicals that I really liked as a kid as well, you know. And then really, I used to watch westerns with my dad as well, and that kind of whole cinematic space. So now I think they would be, actually everything's going to get a bit closer, you know, like visually as well.
Hi, welcome back. I'm just waiting to get Anne Maree back on here live. Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
Welcome back, and thank you
you
very much for a really wonderful, enlightening talk. I think watching back, I kind of, I know it was only a couple of days ago, but I was like, I really enjoyed kind of hearing about all these kind of aspects of that film and your wider practice there as well. So thanks very much. So we have a little bit of time to kind of continue the conversation. We've opened it up to questions from the audience as well. I can see at the moment that nothing has come in. So even though we're on Zoom, some things kind of take me back to the usual gallery questions, where I always am the one to kind of pose that first question and kind of keep it going. But hopefully people will oh, look at that, here we go. So I have a question here from Niamh, which says, when you collect material, info, ideas, either in general or in preparation of a specific piece, do you keep a hard copy notebook as well as your digital notes documentation? And if so, what is your style of notebooking? And this is asking as a third year BA Visual Arts student at Shirkin. If not, do you think the artist's notebook is becoming a thing of the past? And also she says, I really enjoyed watching Covered Road and the story told and the conflicting feelings it evoked. So that's
great, like, because that's the film I made with my dad a very long time ago, so that's great. It's still that's the only film I have online, actually. But with the notebook, it's mainly I always kept like a visual diary, so then actually my phone is my notebook, so I would take photographs all the time. I don't necessarily put them on Instagram all the time either, but they're for me, and they're kind of what I like looking at. And then it comes together. Then eventually I write a lot as well. So that might be kind of a old school process, but it really helps me to gather my thoughts and what I'm working on. There actually was a script to Rialto Twirlers as well that I wrote. With all the camera angles in it as well, but for funding as well, you have to kind of write scripts. So that was the first time I did that as well. So I think mainly I use my phone, and I do write words within a notebook. And then sometimes I do find these notebooks and then I just have to put them in recycling. So, but I wouldn't stop using notebooks, because I think it's really important to like journal, and whatever is your style is your style, I don't think, like me and Chris were talking about, like as well, like me to do using analog photography as well. Like I still take my medium format camera out, but I don't like necessarily, with the prints, I don't necessarily exhibit them, but it's all part of the process.
And so you don't like storyboard necessarily then?
No, no, no. I did with Rialto Twirlers, but my storyboard, my DP Tim Hood couldn't really understand it. So, and then I think I stopped drawing I did core year in NCAD, and I don't think I've drawn in like a long time. It wasn't like, I think I began to embrace technology and what it could do for me as an artist very early. So yeah.
I've got a comment here from Siobhan who says, it's great to hear you talking about the twirlers. Wonderful process to have witnessed in production and pre-production, best from all in common ground. And actually, when, of course, we did this conversation just the other day, but we talked a little bit afterwards and beforehand about some of the other things that I kind of wish we'd have been able to share. And maybe just to go back and talk about the specifics of the making of Rialto Twirlers and this kind of legacy in a way. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about that. It's 10 years ago, and you had talked a little bit about the way that some of the participants that actually engaged with, say, the premiere of the film, or, what is that legacy of the Rialto Twirlers? And I wonder if that's something maybe you could kind of just touch on and expand on a little bit.
Like, I think it would be different now. So that was like 2010. And I think even I joined Twitter in 2009. I should have way more followers than I do, but but I don't engage with it that much. But I think it would be different now because everyone is on social media. So the legacy within the community would be even stronger. Back then it was like, I told you that we went to the film premiered at the Jamison, back then, I think it's Audi now, but Jamison Dublin International Film Festival, which was like huge. And like I had all passes for the group and the performers that showed up for that shoot. And only Lee, the male performer, showed up. And like, he wasn't really impressed at all, and like, he did enjoy it, but it wasn't like somewhere where he would go all the time or around filmmakers or and so forth. I think even when the show or the film exhibited in the lab, I don't think anyone from the Rialtors showed up either, and they were, there was taxis booked for them and everything like that. And I don't think it was they were disinterested. It was like they got on with their own lives, and then that's just what happens within a collaborative project like this. I do think now it would be a bit different though. And I do think then, like 10 years later, like working with the Rohingya girls and women, that I was very aware of giving them more of a voice because of that process as well, like the divide between working in a community and what happens when you make work in a community which you're not essentially part of. And then, but making sure then that, further along in my work, that I give other people even a stronger voice. The only thing with Rialto Twirlers though is that I didn't want to objectify them in any way. Like, they would come from a very, like, what's considered, like a disadvantaged background. And I wanted to highlight like something really positive in the area, because that area would have been like, there was a very huge like heroin epidemic in that area for so long, crime and so forth. So I removed those connotations from them.
I've got a question here from Una as well. Thanks for that response actually as well. She was saying, she's wondering if you could talk a little bit about what excites you about online formats and restrictions or freedom or possibilities you feel there, without divulging any secret projects, of course. I mean, of course you can divulge secret projects, but
yeah.
I mean, obviously, in the context of everything that's happening, it's kind of interesting to see what are those. We always think about it in kind of limitations, but you're realizing, of course, that there's so much potential in kind of the online format here. So I wonder if that's something you could.
Yeah, like it's. I mentioned this in the little interview of like who, what my guilty pleasures are at the moment, and it's the Queens of Captivity, who are these drag queens, and then they have a show every Thursday. And the way they like transferred their drag show online is actually really amazing. It's really entertaining. It's really like, I think for the Eurovision, they had a section where there was you could see three of them perform to, oh God, that famous Irish dancing thing that was in the Eurovision.
Riverdance.
Yes, that's it. Yes, sorry. So they're all dancing to Riverdance at the same time, and like it was really, really great, and like that felt really immersive. The Sean Burke and then this comedian Michael Fry, what they're doing is they're creating these characters and they're acting together. So you would have Sean Burke, and he's speaking to Sean Burke, but playing himself, but not playing himself, but being another character. And that back and forth really, like, just the adaptation of technology and using that is actually really great. I think Amy are doing a good job of putting artist film works online as well. And more recently, I actually only saw them recently, the curators, Rachel Gilburn and Kate Strain had done these cribs work, which are actually really, really great.
Yeah,
and I only saw them recently, and then I was like, why didn't anyone ask me to do this? But but I really enjoyed them. So it's like I like, that's going back with what other people are doing. For me, I think it would probably be possibly working with actors that I've worked with before, and doing it making work within that might look like a Zoom conversation, but that isn't, and yeah.
A question that I'm going to go back to, I think you've probably been dreading this since the Tuesday when I'd asked you about how you describe your practice as non-fiction filmmaking. And I kind of pose that idea to you of how do you distinguish this from other documentary practices?
Oh yeah, like I think that's probably gone from my bio now because it's not true. It was like, I think with that film, I actually have some notes here. Oh yeah, it was back with Rialto Twirlers, and it went into Missing Green as well as that, playing with the documentary format, and how like I could have, interviewed the Rialto Twirlers and then inserted their performance into a way longer film, but it was my choice as an artist director not to do that. But even within applying for film festivals, it was just basically, the log line was that they were performing this single routine and the single moment for everybody, but actually that wasn't true at all. They were doing, it wasn't a single moment of perfect unity at all. It was like, I think they did 30 something takes, and that even promoting it wasn't the truth. Like, so and then it's kind of like in documentary filmmaking, a lot of interviews are set up, but then a lot of other situations are set up as well. So you think you're watching, the truth, but actually, are you? That's a very deep comment there, but it's kind of true, like essentially, like if you're looking at truth, like what is your, someone can see something differently to you also. So I think even back then with Rialto Twirlers, that wasn't, I don't think I had like even the knowledge, not the knowledge, but like the awareness of that I was messing around with truth either. I was just like, oh, this is the way it is. But actually I was. And I had looked for Missing Green as well. I had looked at this film, Dreams of a Life, where the only footage of this character is like from a concert that she's at. and she meets Nelson Mandela, but then an actor plays her throughout the film, and it's like considered a documentary fiction hybrid. So then Missing Green, the actor Niamh Algar played me walking down Cork Street and into the Liberties. So they're not things I announce that are, you know, like that I'm, you know, in my, but like I suppose I'm being quite subtle about what I say and put out there myself to protect myself as well, you know. I in Leisure with Dignity, for example, the characters in that, the stories I, you know, found from reading, but some of my own experiences with like men came into that as well. And then, so the actors were saying like historical dialogue, but actually my own as well. So that was quite an interesting process. And then I'm in that film as well because the food stylist I was working with, she couldn't make the day of the shoot, and she was playing Countess Aldborough. So then I had to jump in. She was like, you know the character, why don't you do it? But the thing is that a lot of people have seen Leisure with Dignity and they don't even realize it's me playing that character. So that's kind of fascinating in itself. So for the past 10 years, I've probably, you know, I have been kind of playing around with that whole process. And then that's why it's Take a Break as well, because it was when you're embedding yourself within your film works, and even as subtle as that it might look, it actually isn't. It's actually a bit exhausting, especially when you're editing, directing, and so forth. Yeah.
Well, it's an awareness, I guess, that these things are structured, aren't they? And it does give you that kind of freedom, I guess, to kind of play with, you know, the medium of kind of, you know, film, of documentary, to kind of introduce those kind of elements, or acknowledge, I guess, the fact that these things are kind of filtered through a kind of a individual perspective.
Yeah.
I think we're just about out of time. So let me just say another big thanks to you, Anne Maree. Really appreciate it. And for anyone who has not seen Rialto Twirlers yet, it is online on the Glucksman website, www.glucksman.org, on the 1234 exhibition page. It'll be up until Wednesday, so I greatly encourage you to check out this wonderful film. And we will see you here probably in 2 weeks on 29th of October for our next artist talk online with Cassandra Eustace. But for now, thank you very much, Anne Maree Barry.